It's time for the Pittsburgh Sports Reporters, an inside look at your teams in your city.
Welcome to PittsburghSportsHub.com. Mike Prisuta and me, Tim Benz here. Mike and I have just gotten off the air at our respective shows. Mike at WDVE and me at WXDX FM 105.9 The X, your flagship for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And the Penguins are getting ready to move on to round number 2 of the playoffs, but it took some doing, Mike. You can listen to the two of us as well on Penguins Radio, Pens Live 24/7. We're on occasionally throughout the playoffs as we were during the regular season. And, Mike, there is more postseason to be had, but for a while there in Game 6 when I was in Long Island, I was starting to wonder if we get to a Game 7, and you above everybody else that I've worked with, acutely aware of the playoff history between the Penguins and the Isles in decisive games. I wouldn't have liked that matchup coming back to Pittsburgh if history is any indication. It's sure a good thing they got things done with that Brooks Orpik goal in Game 6.
Yeah, the Penguins going against the Islanders in series-deciding games is kind of like Germany in World Wars. You're going to lose, and that's just the way it works out.
0 for 2 versus 0 for 3, but we get the point.
They avoided that, and I think the big picture here is they did advance. The Penguins have not done this in a while, since the first round of 2010, to be specific. And despite all the accolades, despite the lengthy resumes, despite this guy's the best player in the world and that guy's the best at this, and despite, 11 guys who have won the Stanley Cup, this is a team that had checked out in the first round in 2 consecutive postseasons and lost 3 consecutive series. I think that weighed on this team against the Islanders, Tim. I think Dan Biles acknowledging it, that it was at least a little bit of a factor in the immediate aftermath, tells you what a big deal that really was. And I think the Penguins getting past that, they can kind of exhale now and not worry that, oh my God, what if there's another disaster to deal with? They can just go ahead and play now.
Well, so you're of the mindset then that their toughest challenge in the Eastern Conference is beyond them. This is the toughest rung in the ladder to climb? Because a lot of people are saying that it's actually going to become easier to sail these seas moving forward than it was against the Islanders.
I wouldn't put it in those words entirely, although I'm not saying that's a bad theory. I do know we had talked with Phil Bourque, the color analyst of the Penguins and the former Stanley Cup winner. I imagine you guys did the same on the X. And Bourque had speculated about a month or so ago that the first round was going to be a real bear. And if they could just get through, this is before the matchups had even materialized, but Phil Bourque thought if the Penguins could just get past the first round, they might be able to really generate some momentum and find their playoff legs. I'd word it that way as opposed to the challenge is easier or tougher than the previous one. I think they're going to play better.
See, I've been using the phrase the leopard can't change its spots. That's what I keep coming back to with this team, and I need to see it before I believe it. I need to see that these guys are going to play dedicated in their own end, that they're not going to have as many turnovers, that they're going to be good through the neutral zone, that they're not going to turn the puck over at the blue line. I mean, every time I want to think that that's going to be the case, they show me evidence and reason to the contrary. So it's hard for me to just assume that because they were able to dispatch the Islanders, they're going to be able to say, oh, okay, we figured it out now, and things are going to be better and look like the 15-game win streak of the regular season. I allowed myself to believe that this team was going to be different going into this postseason based on all the evidence that I had seen during the regular season. But even when they won Game 5 behind Vaucoun and got up 3-2, they so quickly reverted back to their ways of turning the puck over at bad times and hanging their goaltender out to dry. It's just a good thing that the second-string goalie put in a more than top first-string performance to help bail them out of that game. I don't believe that round 2 is going to be any different against the Islanders because the Islanders can do a lot. Sorry, against the Senators, because the Senators can do a lot of the same things that the Islanders did. They just have a better goaltender. So I actually think it might be more difficult.
Well, unless the Leopard was actually the team that we saw the second half of the regular season, unless the Leopard was the team that won 15 in a row and 7 in a row and was really hard to score against because it was so disciplined and so responsible and executed the system so well. Maybe that was a different Pens team than the one we're going to see the rest of the postseason, that one that played against the Islanders. Maybe it was that pressure we just talked about weighing on them. I don't know. Maybe that's just what Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang have become, guys who will try to make a ridiculously hard play instead of an obvious easy one and pay the price for it. Maybe that's something that they're going to have to work around the rest of the playoffs. But I know this much, Tim. Ottawa is not going to be able to score the way the Islanders did, but it's going to be tougher to score against. So you better keep the goals against down. Brooks Orpik was talking to that with Pierre Maguire on the ice right after the series. If they haven't figured that out by now, maybe they never will.
Well, they can score too, though, Ottawa. And they showed that last round. I know it's...
Yeah, a little more against Montreal. I didn't see very much of that series. I don't know if that was the Canadians being poor or if the changes Ottawa made has made that a better offensive team. But from the regular season meetings, I remember watching those games thinking, man, they're going to go a long time between Senators' goals here.
Well, if the Penguins play the Senators over a long period of time in this best of 7, if it goes 6 games, 7 games, am I wrong for holding out hope that the Penguins might get bailed out by the fact that somewhere along the way the Senators can't help themselves in a slightly different way than the Penguins can't help themselves? I mean, the Penguins can't help themselves by sometimes playing too open, like you said, looking for the hard play when an easy play is there. That gets them in trouble. Do the Senators too often get themselves in trouble, especially against the Penguins, trying to take out other agendas, perhaps those set forth by the owner who wants to exact revenge for what happened with Erik Karlsson?
They certainly seemed distracted last time they met, did they not?
He's still distracted. He's tweeting about it as recently as yesterday.
And when that stuff's coming from the top down, it's not good. Tough job for the Walrus coming up in this series to keep his players focused. I'll leave the other stuff out of it because I actually think Paul McLean's a pretty entertaining guy. But your theory is that somebody's going to lose this series. Either the Penguins are going to play poorly or Ottawa's going to get distracted and get off track. I still think
I could see the Senators playing well enough to win, like the Islanders basically played well enough to win, but they've got a better goaltender, which to me makes it more likely that they could. I could also see the Penguins flat out winning it because they're more talented and they play the right way. The talent is there. I just think eventually their talent won out against the Islanders. They didn't necessarily win because they played better hockey or more sound hockey. In fact, their lack of sound hockey is what kept the Islanders in it.
I think their lack of sound hockey was glaring because we hadn't seen that down the stretch in the regular season. But if you really take the 6 games in their entirety, the Penguins had 2 shutouts in that series. There's been 7 shutouts in the playoffs as we tape this. The Penguins have 2 of them, 2 different goaltenders getting that done. The Penguins' power play dominated. The Penguins' penalty killing dominated. The Penguins won 2 blowout games, and they also won 2 overtime games, which proved that they were capable of not only blowing this team out, but winning when it was winning time. I think a lot of us, forget a lot of us, I thought it was going to be a 4-game sweep. I thought it would be 3-2, 2-1, those kind of games, hard-fought, competitive games that the Penguins would win because of their talent. It didn't quite happen that way, but I'm not convinced the Ottawa series can't go that way as well.
We got 3 minutes left. Vokoun, Fleury, what do you do?
I get why people are thinking go back to Fleury, but if that happens, I'm going to be scratching my head because you were there yesterday. You heard Dan Bosma talk about
I asked him a question
sensational
about it.
saves in huge situations. I mean, he's throwing the plaudits at Tomas Vokoun, and why wouldn't you? I mean, let's look at the 6 games in their entirety again against the Islanders. The only games the Penguins lost were games that Marc-Andre Fleury had meltdowns and gave up awful goals in. Now, I expect they'll get back to him at some point, and I expect those things won't happen when they do. But what is the rush?
Well, why would you put him in a situation where it's just set up for failure? If Vokoun plays badly, like for instance, if Ottawa comes in here and boat races the Penguins 5-0, then you've got an opportunity to put Fleury back in. There's a reason to put him back in. You put Fleury back in right now, you're only putting him back in with the fans just waiting to jump all over him and point to him and say he's the reason why they lost. If they had Vokoun still in there, they would have won their 3rd game in a row with Vokoun between the nets. If you want to get Fleury back in there and you're worried about his head or his mental state, why put him in an only lose situation by having him start instead of Vokoun?
The only reason to do that would be that they believe, and I'm not saying this is the case, I'm just speculating that this is a theory. The only reason to do that would be if they think he is clearly their best chance to win the Stanley Cup, and they absolutely have to have him in net playing well if that's going to happen. If you look at the way they handled personnel in this series, they took guys out who weren't performing and tried to get some energy from people such as Tyler Kennedy and Joe Vitale. They did that at the expense of Jussi Jokinen and Tanner Glass. But they also went back to Simone Dupre after a Game 3 performance that just screamed, this guy's in over his head, this guy's not ready, don't ever let him leave the bench again until next season. And they went back to Dupre in Game 5, and he played pretty well in Game 5 and pretty well in Game 6. Now that's relatively minor compared to the starting goalie, but there is a precedent for going back to a guy who struggled just because that's the guy you want in there in the first place.
Well, that'll do it for us for now. Next time we talk to you, at least at the time as we are
And
airing
I'd play
this,
Vokun. Am I clear on that?
Yeah, I would play Vokun too. As much of a Fleury fan as I am, I'd
At least
go with
until
Thomas
something
Vokun.
crazy happens, like he loses a game.
Which will happen at some point in this series, you have to assume. But at any rate, at the time that we're airing this, it looks like it's going to be Tuesday and Friday at Consol Energy Center. Those are the reports out of Canada right now. Should that change, obviously, the series will change by the time we air this, but we're thinking the next time we're on with Pittsburgh Sports Hub on the Pittsburgh Sports Reporters, it'll probably be the day of Game 4 up in Ottawa. So between now and then, make sure you listen to WDVE and 105.9 The X and listen to the both of us on Penguins Live, Pens Radio 24/7. You can also listen to the afternoons to Mark Madden and Stan Savern on 970 ESPN and David Todd, too, on 970 ESPN.
No turnovers. Nice job.
Way to go.
Make the simple play every time.
Every time. The simple play right now is to leave.